What's up, legends, and welcome to part 3 of our Pokemon card flipping experiment. In this series, we're basically seeing if we can make a profit from flipping Pokemon cards, and we're doing that by sourcing raw cards, getting them graded, hopefully increasing the condition rarity of those cards, and by doing so increasing the value of them, and then flipping them onto the market to see if we can actually make a profit from that. And of course, I'm personally doing this from the perspective of a pure collector, so I'm not here to build a Pokemon card business myself, but I'm here to try and use some of these cards as a way to get more funds to buy more cards that I want for my collection. Now, we've already gone through the process of sourcing our cards, getting them graded, and the last step was selling them and see how we do from that step. Now, if you missed the first few videos, I recommend you check those out in the card up here. But today we are going to go over the results from flipping these cards, and I'll also be sharing some of my insights and some of the mistakes we made, some of the things I've learned, and what I plan to do moving forward. So we may end up making this a continuous series, so I hope you'll subscribe below so you don't miss more Pokemon card flipping videos in the future. Now, for those who flip cards for a living, we often talk about what's called the play, which is essentially the card that you're going to go after that you think may be undervalued, or maybe you see potential based on the condition of the card to grade it and significantly increase the value by doing so. And so what we use as our play was Radiant Eevee, the promo card that came in one of the Pokemon Go collection boxes. We ended up sourcing a bunch of these cards in hopes of finding a few that would be gradable, and I thought we found maybe a few decent candidates. You know, none of them were incredible, but I thought that some of them had the potential of being maybe a 10 or a 9.5 or whatever. But in our last video, we did get our grades back, and we unfortunately got totally wrecked on our grades from CGC. Like I said, I really expected that we were going to maybe get possibly 2 10s and maybe one 9.5, but instead we got 2 9s and one 8.5. So in a lot of ways, based on our grades, our experiment here was a little bit over before it began, but I did want to come back here and still share with you the results, to share whether or not we made a profit or a loss from these cards. Now, you know, the hope was that even if we got a lower of the two grades, that we would at least be able to break even. So let's see if we were able to break even, or if we even made a profit or made a complete loss. So let's get into the spreadsheet and I'll show you real quick. So like I said, we did end up with 3 CGC graded Radiant Eevee cards, which I think is a really fantastic card, and we'll talk about that as a choice for a card to get graded in just a moment. We don't have to worry about all of this. But if we just take a look at our 3 cards here, you can see exactly what we did. So first of all, we sourced our cards, and like I said, we got a bunch all at first, and we kind of kept a few that we thought were good grading candidates, and then kind of just resold the rest. So that turned out to be about $6 per card for each of these, and some of these actually even came from a collection box that I actually opened here on the channel. But again, they were worth around $6 at the time, so that's kind of the card cost. And of course, you know, you don't just have the card cost, you also have the cost of grading. And so I figured that out to be about $35 a card. And again, that's based on the tiers that were available from CGC at the time. Again, this was about 9 months ago. It's been a while since we did our last video. And of course, you have to include, you know, your shipping costs. They also usually have insurance calculated in there. So yeah, if you calculate everything out, $35 is actually about what we paid for that. And so adding those up, that brings our total cost basis to $41. So based on that, and we had talked about this in the previous video, we knew that we had to make around $41 at least to break even after getting them graded and reselling those slabs. And the hope was that we can get a high enough grade that this would maybe be worth maybe like $60 or $100 or whatever, and we can actually make a little bit of money off of it. So if we look at our very first one, the CGC 9, this was the first one to sell, but it actually did take quite a while. And that's one thing I did find out, is these cards were not super liquid. You know, I think it's clear that people are wanting the 10s. I think some people are okay with 9.5s, but for an ultra modern card like this, a CGC 9 is just, it's practically worth what you paid for the card itself, and a lot of times. But anyway, let's move over here. So we ended up selling this one on eBay, and we didn't do too bad. We sold it for $22. But unfortunately, as you can see, that is a big loss from our cost basis here. And actually, if you also have to calculate that there's usually shipping costs that you're covering, and there's also eBay fees, taxes, and all that. So our total earnings from this was actually $19.31 for basically a net loss of $21.69. So for our first card, we basically paid someone else for us to do this experiment, essentially. So like I said, these cards kind of sat on eBay for quite a long time. They were not super liquid, and so for our second CGC 9, a lot of these numbers are going to be the same. I took a little bit different approach with this one, because actually through a Facebook group, a Pokemon card Facebook group, I saw that there was someone who was asking about kind of a lower grade CGC slabs, and so I just offered this kind of within the group, and he actually asked if he'd be willing to do a trade. And I wasn't as open to that at first, but then I kind of thought through it, because if we can actually trade for a card, again, we're dealing with a CGC 9 Eevee. It's not a super liquid card. If we could actually exchange that for a card that's maybe a little bit more liquid, a little more popular, then we may actually have a better time selling that one. And so actually I was able to trade this slab for the Origin Form Palkia from Astral Radiance, which had come out maybe about a month prior to speaking to this person. And so if we take a look here, back when I had sold this, if we look on TCG Player, about maybe 9 months ago or so, yeah, this card was going for around $50. And so based on that, we actually would have sort of made a profit if we had actually sold this card. Now, I actually made the mistake of just kind of holding on to this card. I probably should have sold it right then, because as you can see, this card value has gone down over time. So I still think that was a decent strategy to make that trade, but the mistake I made was not just up and selling this card right away. I probably could have just thrown it up here on TCG Player and sold it pretty quickly. Now, actually, if you want to purchase this Origin Form Palkia Alt Art, I do still have it on hand, and it's actually for sale up on the Pokemon Legends Marketplace, which is my new marketplace where you can buy a lot of the cards that I'm pulling from my videos, as well as a lot of the cards that are being sold for people in the community. So make sure you go check that out. Click the link in the description below. So as you can see, this card is now around $36, $37. So if we calculate that into where we're at, we're technically still at a loss of $4, but we did have the potential to make a little bit off of that in a way. So wanted to at least share that. And then here's our Radiant Eevee 8.5, which it just blows my mind. I don't think that these cards deserved as low grades that they got. I think I could have seen the first two being 9.5s and the third one being a 9, but I just feel like CGC was being ridiculous. But anyway, if we take a look at this one finally sold literally just like a few weeks ago, which is why it took so long to finally release this video, because I wanted to actually share all the final results. And basically I had it sitting there for a long time as a buy it now for $19.99, and wasn't getting any bites. So after a while, I just decided, let's just throw it out at auction and see what happens. I thought, I didn't think it would go for 99 cents, so thankfully it didn't. But I thought maybe we'd get at least a little bit more than we did, but we actually only sold it for $5.50. Basically the cost of the raw card itself. So there you go. A loss of $30. So whoever you were that bought that card, you're welcome. We did this experiment just for you, so you could have this card and basically pay you to have this card. Now, these graded cards were essentially bags, and that's kind of a term that's come to be more popular within the Pokemon card investing and flipping community. It basically means that if you're the one left holding the bag, then that's kind of what they call those slabs, is a bag. So that's definitely what happened in this case. Again, it was my first time grading with CGC, so there were a lot of things I didn't know going into it, but yeah, we got totally wrecked, unfortunately, in this case. So now what I kind of want to talk about is some of the mistakes that we made in this process and hopefully use it as a way to figure out what we can learn to do next time. So the first thing that I would say is, based on the card that we picked, I would say, we didn't know what we didn't know. I think if you look at the card that we chose, the Radiant Eevee, right now you'd probably be like, why in the world did you select that card? That's just a junk card. But really at the time, we didn't really know that. I personally thought that this card had a lot of potential, being the fact that it's a very popular Pokemon, is a shiny Pokemon. But what I didn't take into account, and I didn't know at the time, was that Pokemon Go as a set would be not very well received at all. And so I think that hurt things. For one thing, it just makes this card less sought after, less people searching for this on eBay trying to find a graded copy of it. So that's one aspect. I also think another aspect was the fact that it was a promo card. And for a lot of these promo cards that come in collection boxes and similar products, it's very hard to find ones in good condition. A lot of them are not very centered very well. A lot of them have whitening because, as you're pulling them out, you can often damage them pretty easily. I think, you can go with promo cards, but you do have a big risk when it comes to that. And I think it can be a little bit harder to source those cards. And speaking of sourcing the cards, one thing that I didn't like about this process was, first of all, I was coming at this with a limited budget. I am a content creator, but I do spend a lot of my funds on opening product. And so, to set aside even $100 for an experiment like this, it's not the easiest thing to do, with what I am doing here on the channel. But I did, set aside some of those funds to do a play like this. And so, we spent maybe $50 to get 10 of the Radiant Eevee cards. I spent that on TCG Player, and literally none of those cards ended up being grade worthy. I definitely wouldn't recommend sourcing from TCG Player in most cases. So we also spent a little bit more on eBay trying to find some actual grade worthy cards. And I think I may have actually purchased a collection box and pulled one of the cards just directly from that collection box. So, all that adds up. And then so you add that onto the actual grading costs. Again, I think, what did we say, about $36? We said $35 per card. Let's just say an even 30. That's 90 just to get these cards graded. So that's a lot of capital that you're kind of tying up into this whole process. And so I didn't really like that aspect, and it ended up not being very profitable because none of the cards that I had purchased initially were actually worthy to send off. So it took some time to then sell those cards back and make up those costs. So I guess for myself, I think the issue was just tying up too much capital into this one project here. And again, it didn't end up being that fruitful in the end. The other mistake that I made, and this was a pretty big one, was actually going with CGC as the grading company. Now, the reason I went with them at the time was because PSA was still sort of shut down. I think they were starting to grade a little bit, but we didn't really know how long they were going to take to get cards back to us. I think we thought, for all we know, it could still be another 9 months to a year for them to get some of these cards back based on the backlog that they had before. So that's why I went with CGC, because they are pretty fast and they're still a pretty reputable company that will still retain hopefully some value for these graded slabs. But what I did not factor in was the fact that PSA was now starting to get back into full swing, and really PSA would have been a much better choice in this case. And that's partially speaking on the value side of things. I think PSA cards do command more value than CGC generally, but also it has to do with the grading scale. And man, I did not count on CGC being this harsh with their grading. Like I said, I really think that 8.5 deserved to be a 9, and those 9s deserve to be a 9.5. They probably would have honestly gotten PSA 10s for those two 9s. So yeah, we got totally wrecked on those grades, and that probably would not have been the case if we had gone with PSA or even Beckett for that matter. So again, those are a few of the mistakes that I think we made in the process. Some of it, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know about, I think, Pokemon Go being such a bad set for most people. We didn't know about PSA just about to open up. So take it for what it's worth, but still something that we can learn from. But now, based on that, I want to share a little bit more about my new strategy moving forward based on what we learned. So the first thing is I'm actually going to sort of combine my collecting with my flipping as far as my strategy goes. And what I mean by that is, first of all, I'm actually a Beckett collector when it comes to getting cards graded. So I've decided that I'm actually going to take the approach of flipping Beckett graded cards. So I know what I was just saying, PSA is by far the safer play. They grade easier, they tend to command a higher value in certain cases, and they are pretty liquid when it comes to selling your cards. Whereas Beckett, I feel like the value is definitely there. I feel like Beckett is just probably number 2 when it comes to reputation within the grading world for Pokemon cards. However, the liquidity may not be as high, and I think they may not command as much of a value for 9s and 9.5s necessarily, but at the same time, there is the higher risk, higher reward going on here, where you do have the potential to get a gold label 10 or even a black label, which can bring in some serious gains from Beckett. So again, the reason that I'm doing this is because I am already sending cards off to Beckett for my personal collection. And so what I'm actually going to do is start sending in just a few additional cards along with those submissions that I think I may be able to flip onto the market and maybe get a little bit of money back so I can continue doing this. And part of the advantage of doing this is I'll actually be able to take advantage of Beckett's bulk pricing. I think they charge $18 per card if you send 10 or more cards in. Now, of course, PSA and CGC, they have their own bulk pricing as well. But again, it would be harder for me to get that bulk pricing if I'm only sending about 5 cards here to PSA or CGC and then another 5 cards here to Beckett. I figure I might as well just send them all to Beckett, and I'll just kind of be known as kind of a Beckett flipper. So not necessarily right for everyone. I think if you are in here just to make money and you really want to command the best value and have the higher potential of getting 10s on your cards, then PSA usually is the best choice, but this is just what I'm doing personally. So the second part of my new strategy is when it comes to sourcing cards. Like I said, I didn't like the way I went about it last time about tying up a bunch of money for purchasing a bunch of copies of one single card in order just to maybe grade 1 or 2 of them. Instead, what I want to do is actually be very intentional for looking out for whatever cards that I'm looking to grade, and not just doing it online, but even mostly doing it in in-person situations. So that would be going to my local card shop and sorting through their binders, seeing if I can find any strong cards that I think could get graded that may also command quite a bit of value. I actually did this pretty recently with one of the cards I'm going to be doing for a next play. I actually went to my local LGS and found a pristine, I think pristine, Shadowless Gyarados. This card, I'm still blown away that I even found it at all. So we're going to be sending that off to Beckett. Another place you could look for cards is at a convention like Collecticon, which I was able to do pretty recently when I went to Collecticon Orlando. I actually picked up 2 of the Charizard V-Star promo cards, which I just really love this card myself. And so my idea with this is I actually want to have at least 1 in my collection, and then I'll have several chances of getting a 10, and whichever ones I don't want to keep, I'll just go ahead and sell and either recoup the cost or possibly make money. For instance, if I end up getting like a 9.5 and a 10, it'll be a tough decision to decide if I want to actually keep the 10 or sell the 10 for a significant profit. And then the other way that I'll be sourcing cards is literally just through cards that I'm pulling myself, because I do quite a few openings. And obviously that's not a great strategy because you don't know what you're going to get. But thankfully I have pulled a few great cards that I am going to get graded. One being the Rayquaza VMAX, the alt art from Evolving Skies. I actually pulled this card twice, and so that was kind of fortunate because I have 1 to keep in my binder and 1 that I do plan on grading and hopefully grading high so we can sell it for a significant profit. Some of you saw I also recently pulled the Charizard SAR from Pokemon 151, the Japanese set. So that is another one I'm going to be sending off. I think it looks pretty great. If nothing else, it's a very new card, and often you can sell cards for quite a bit more when the set is still very new compared to down the road. So that might be one that we'll see how it goes. And then I will say there's actually one exception to what I had just said as far as sourcing the cards, and this is kind of something that I feel like I learned in this process. Is I did not realize how hard CGC grades. I really think that, you know, certain cards, like I personally think that CGC 9 is probably a Beckett 9.5 in a lot of cases. Now it just depends on the card. You really have to look at it in the case, but I really think that that could be a possibility. We're going to test that theory out in this next experiment here, because I actually purchased a few CGC slabs from eBay that looked pretty good on the front and the back pictures, and when I received them in person, they looked pretty solid to me. So first of all, we have this Alakazam EX, which was a CGC 8.5. Now this probably will live in my collection, but you never know. Maybe we'll eventually grade another one, and one of these will be for sale. But I have a strong feeling that this could increase to a Beckett 9, maybe even a 9.5. We'll see. I also got this CGC 9 of the Hidden Fates promo. I love this card. Again, this is another one I want for my collection, but it's also a card that I think is always kind of pretty sought after. And so if I end up grading several of these, I think it won't be too hard to sell this card down the line. So this was a 9. I'm hopeful that we can get this up to a 9.5. But again, if it's just for my personal collection, I would still be okay with a Beckett 9 as well. And then the third CGC card that I actually picked up from Whatnot. Now, Whatnot is the app featuring live streamed auctions where you can bid on Pokemon cards and often get some pretty great deals, like I did on this Ancient Mew right here. Now, make sure you use my link in the description below. You'll get $15 off your purchase on Whatnot. But man, I could not believe that we actually purchased this Ancient Mew for only about $30, which is basically what it's worth raw. And when I got this card and cracked it out of its case, this card, it looks immaculate to me. So we're definitely going to be setting this in to Beckett as well, hopefully to get, you know, maybe at least a 9, maybe even a 9.5. That would be really cool, but we'll see. So anyway, guys, that is kind of my new strategy moving forward. And like I said, this is a big experiment, and so I don't know if it's the best strategy for sure, but it's kind of what I'm going with next, kind of based on what I've learned from before and from what I've learned from other people. So if you see any problems with my strategy, you're welcome to let me know in the comments below. But make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our next video. We'll definitely show our Beckett grade returns from several of these cards. We'll also be sharing some more data for how much these cards sold for later on, so you won't want to miss those. I think you'll want to check out one of these videos on screen if you like Pokemon card content. And lastly, I want to let you know that no matter what you're going through, you are not alone. God is with you and He loves you, and we do too. I'll catch you next time.